Hello everyone and welcome. Today, we are choosing some potential mini encounters for my players. So those who have seen my previous videos will know the big baddie or boss of the game is Cromwell. But of course, I need some little critters and creatures to keep them on their toes before they meet him. I've also put together some loose ideas for a trap I will be creating as well. To help me with my search, I'm going to dive into the monster manual to see what it's got. I'll likely go research some forums as well to see what other people are creating too. The first idea that springs to mind is throwing a couple of hellhounds somewhere in the dungeon. They will also be really fun to draw. So yeah, let's start with one of those. So according to the monster manual, hellhounds are often in service to evil creatures such as devils and fire giants. Cromwell in this game is very evil, so they are most certainly a good match for him. Hellhounds are also a lot smarter than other beasts, which aligns them more with Cromwell. I mean, one quirk about hellhounds is that if they're denied regular feeding, they'll turn on their owners. Is this how Cromwell meets his sticky end? Being devoured by a hellhound? Who knows? I may tweak the stats slightly as time goes on, but I'm happy so far with the challenge rating they have, which is a 3. Going on the K9 theme, I was also looking at a winter wolf. I want to set my game in winter, to play on the brutality of the dungeons, as they would be freezing and dark. Also, it would be nice for the players to break into the tower in the dead of cold on a winter night. I can also write about some environmental hazards, such as snow and ice. I was also looking into a dire wolf as well, but I don't think I'd want the wolf to attack the players. I knew Anne Boleyn had a pet dog during her time as queen, but for the sake of this game, I could make her pet a dire wolf that has also been imprisoned in the dungeon. Another encounter I want to consider is maybe a ghost or spectre of some kind. A lot of people have died in a tower, and out of those, a lot would have had some unfinished business, particularly if they were wronged by an adversary, or they were innocent and condemned to death. I don't want to create a ghost for ghost's sake though. I could maybe introduce the ghost of Anne Boleyn's brother as he was executed before her. This could introduce some nice opportunities for role-playing, in addition to learning more about why Anne Boleyn was sent to the tower in the first place. Maybe if the players try to attack him, he then retaliates. Actually, one particularly nasty encounter could be some flesh-eating ghouls, employed by Cromwell to guard the tower. A dungeon like this is an ideal environment for them. It's damp, dark, and without being too graphic, there is probably a lot of flesh and decomposition going on from all the torture. Perhaps I can keep them in the dank basement. The royal quarter where Anne will live is a bit nicer than the lower levels, of course. If anyone knows anything about the Tower of London through the ages, they may be familiar with the horrendous torture techniques jailers would use to extract information from people. Obviously, a lot of the time this information was false, as people will say anything when they're experiencing that amount of stress and pain. The London Dungeons attraction talks a lot about this, and a few museums in London have some of these devices on display as exhibits. So if you want to learn more about them, I'd highly recommend going to London and seeing them for yourself. It's quite morbid, but does give an insight into the culture of the time and how people were very desensitised to violence. Now, when I'm building my encounters, I want them to be engaging. I realise this sometimes requires some control from the GM to ensure the players don't just blast through some key scenes. The first thing to consider is the premise. For example, in the first room, the players encounter a hellhound. Now, it seems plausible a hellhound would be there, given that Cromwell is an evil wizard who needs something to guard his prisoners. Maybe at some point in his life, before he chose a school of illusion, he was studying conjuration, and made a deal with a demon to guarantee his rise to power. Anyway, back to the hellhound encounter. So what could make encountering a hellhound more engaging is setting it up first. Perhaps the players learn there could be hellhounds in a tower, from a bard singing tales about prisoners who entered the tower to never come out. Or maybe they heard a raven mimicking the cries of those who entered it beforehand. So this brings me on to my second point, which is a type of foe you are choosing. So for me, I specifically chosen hellhounds, as they are fairly smart creatures that typically work for an evil master. So Cromwell fits the bill for this. Plus, they make exceptional guard dogs, which is very important if they are guarding a queen, so that she cannot escape. Also, Historians believe Thomas Cromwell owned some quite extraordinary animals. Some even think he may have had a pet leopard. He was also known for owning a lot of birds, greyhounds, and even beavers. So yeah, the fact he has a guard dog of some kind fits in with his character backstory. My other foe or friend, as it may be, will be the ghost of Anne Boleyn's brother, George Boleyn. So this is super relevant to her story, as he is also implicated in the wider conspiracy against her. So that should be a really interesting encounter for the players. Additionally, the Ravens have their own lore that ties into the Tower of London's history, so all in all, this brings everything together under one overall storyline. Another thing to keep in mind when creating encounters is interactive elements. So let's say when the players encounter the Hellhounds, there is a pit with a trap below them that they can lure the Hellhounds into to contain them. In this instance, it's not just about fighting, but also problem solving. Perhaps there is a hidden lever that opens a pit, or there is a gate or divide that comes down when it is pulled, separating the Hellhounds from the rest of the party. Adding these elements into encounters makes them more interesting and forces the players to think outside of just using combat to achieve a goal, which in this case could be getting past the Hellhounds to reach Anne Boleyn's cell. Also, you want to help your players as much as you can. Well, I do. More so because I'm designing some pretty tough baddies. So in this instance, think about the types of objects you can place in rooms that they can use. So let's say they're in a courtyard, about to go into the dungeon, when unexpectedly, a flock of ravens begins to attack them. And for fun, let's just say these ravens are cursed and are rather hideous. Yes, some players may have shields they can use for cover, and spellcasters no doubt have some useful tricks up their sleeve. But what if our party has very little help in terms of resources? What now? As a GM or game designer, what will you include in their immediate environment to help them? Perhaps there are some reinforced chain nets they can use to try and catch the ravens as they swoop down. Or maybe there is some sort of mechanical crossbow they can commandeer. Either way, the environment or world you put your players in shouldn't operate in a vacuum. Using it during encounters or allowing it to influence how your players interact with monsters will make your game far more immersive and richer. However, I do have a word of warning for when you are building an engaging encounter, which is don't overdo it. Try to add no more than 3 elements to any encounter. What I mean by this is that you don't want to add so many elements that it's difficult to keep track of them. For example, during the encounter, you don't want players saving someone or something, disarming a trap, activating a secret weapon, and also fighting the baddie at the same time. This is all very distracting and can lead to disengagement as the players and GM become overwhelmed. Everything should be done in moderation, and too much of something is never a good thing, even in D&D encounters. Right, that's all for today everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.